So, getting back to the episode, one of the condemned in sickbay has taken Seven hostage. And after the titles, Tuvok and the Warden show up while the guy is making demands and the doctor is trying to handle negotiations, until Seven has had enough and just removes herself from the situation. Janeway doesn't pay her enough for this bullshit. The prisoner's backup plan goes badly. So that's when, in the ready room, the Warden mentions that these men are being taken away to be executed. And everyone quietly gives each other a look of, well, get a load of this guy. Having capital punishment in this day and age? Well, what does he think this is? The Romulan Empire? Or the Cardassians? Or the Dominion? Or the Ferengi? Or the Klingons? Or the Bajorans? Or the Q Continuum? Or us, actually, if you come right down to it, stupid General Order 4. Look, I'm not going to let that go until they actually explain either it's canceled or why they have it. I just have a hard time imagining any courtroom where the judge is up there. Let's see. You committed mutiny against the captain and people perished. Well, off to prison with you then. No death penalty for you. Next. You killed 25 people and used their heads to make a giant Carmen Miranda hat, which you are currently wearing in my court. Well, off to prison with you. Hopefully you'll reform. Next. You went to the Forbidden Planet. Kill him! Right in the face! Let me reiterate. If you are against the death penalty, I'm not mocking you. I'm on your side. I just don't think Star Trek has any business lecturing on the topic until it sorts its shit out. Figure out why General Order 4 is there, and maybe consider getting rid of it. If you got rid of it, do me the favor of actually saying so. Don't make me assume that somehow it went away because you're all eyeing each other funny in the ready room. Oh, and sort out the Prime Directive while you're at it. I'm having a little trouble reconciling some of your craziness thanks to this. Yes, this person here is the lowest of the low. Do you realize he wiped out an entire village on this planet? Well, lucky for him, we believe in the sanctity of life, so we will not execute you, much as others might think you deserve it, but we will not stoop to that. My only regret is we couldn't get here soon enough to stop you. Captain, there's another village on this planet that's about to be wiped out by a volcano. And how exactly is this my problem? I'm going to lose so many viewers after this show airs. Okay, anyway, speaking of the Prime Directive, it means that, like it or not, Janeway cannot interfere with the fact that these people execute their prisoners. So, she's just going to have to tolerate it. Speaking of things that are hard to tolerate, the Doctor.
And I could have resolved the situation peacefully. Instead, you and Tuvok the Kid had to take matters into your own hands.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to side with the Doctor on this one. Seven, I don't see how you couldn't just stand there like you were supposed to, while the murderer with literally nothing to lose is holding a knife to your throat. You gotta learn a little bit about priorities, Missy. After a fun conversation with the hostage taker, Janeway has them sent to their new cells down in the cargo bay, with force fields in place of bars, naturally, because we are dealing with people who, and I want to be emphatic about this because it's one of the pragmatic reasons that I am against the death penalty. People who are sentenced to death have nothing to lose. What are you going to do? Kill me twice? So, they have taken people who have no respect for life whatsoever, have nothing to lose, and shoved them in a box which is only contained so long as you keep the battery charged. Oh yeah, I forgot. This is a show that talks so much about backups and secondary backups and redundancies, so I'm sure they thought of putting those in places for this, definitely when we're dealing with murderers with nothing to lose. So yeah, I know where this is going. These guys are going to stay locked up about as long as a mobster who's got pictures of the mayor strangling a call girl. While Tuvok shows the Warden around, Neelix shows up with food for them, which the Warden initially refuses because, you know, it's cruel to torture these men before executing them. After insisting that the prisoners be fed something more than gruel, the Doctor and Seven debate capital punishment. You don't have to be told who takes which side. The real action is down in that cargo bay, where the hostage taker, Iko, starts making trouble in his cell. And when the Warden shows up, he makes a veiled threat against the man's children. Prison guards being prison guards, they fall back on tradition. They head into the cell, grab the unarmed prisoner, and then proceed to beat him to within 2.54 centimeters of his life. So it's back to sickbay for Iko, and the aliens are barred from guarding the prisoners from now on. It'll just be down to Tuvok and his security team. This will end well. The doctor calls Seven in to help him out, to use her nanoprobes to deal with the brain damage resulting from the beating that Iko took. She agrees, despite what she sees as a logical disconnect between going to a lot of trouble to help save the life of a man who's awaiting death. Kind of like when they use that alcohol swab before lethal injection. Wouldn't want you to die of infection before you're scheduled to go. So after waking up, he shoots the breeze with Seven and soon becomes a model patient, until suddenly he has horrible stomach pains. I knew feeding him Neelix's food was a mistake. He's feeling suddenly, overwhelmingly, guilty about the terrible things that he has done. And he's never felt guilt in his entire life, so he must have been in politics before this. Meanwhile, Neelix begins his subplot of befriending a prisoner who claims that he's innocent, that he's a victim of racial prejudice. Neelix goes off to study this and reports statistics to Tom and B'Elanna that are clearly inspired by the disparate incarceration rates of black Americans versus white Americans. And I'm not here to mock that. America's criminal justice system is flawed in several ways. Believe me, I could go on all day about those issues. However, the way this is presented, it's so on the nose, it's distracting. It keeps pulling me out of the episode experience whenever they go this way. I mean, the problem with Repentance is that it is simultaneously two different things. Now, one is that it wants to be a commentary about the death penalty. Yet it somehow manages to thread the needle so that it is both too much and not enough. Too much because it goes overboard on trying to state its case, but not enough because it has nothing new to offer. What bothers me so much about Star Trek message shows is that when I don't agree, I detest their propaganda. And when I do agree, I detest their propaganda. One of the funniest criticisms I've ever had of one of my reviews was when I didn't score family on TNG. A person remarked that was a mistake because Star Trek is known for its allegories. I asked, well, what was this an allegory for? They said it's an allegory for itself. So yeah, I think that that's an apt way of describing this episode. It is an allegory of itself. I just feel that if you're going to address a social issue, you need to go the extra 1,600 meters and offer something that sheds greater light upon it. This brings us to the secondary plot, which you might be saying, this is what you were complaining about it not having, Chuck. This is the part where they're bringing in something new. Except not really. There are always cases of people who have been on death row who wind up having changes of heart, who become new people and try to atone for what they've done. And this kind of thing, it was a big deal on an episode of Law and Order about the death penalty. A person who made such a turnaround, and yet they were still going to go forward with the execution. But it made it all uncomfortable because now she's a different person. Yeah, we've been down this route already. This isn't anything new about the death penalty, but it is an intriguing idea of watching what happens when someone is coping with the idea of never having been guilty in their life to suddenly realize the enormity of the crimes that they have faced. This idea is fascinating. Exploring this is about what the episode should be about. However, because it has been conjoined to this plot line, it is becoming overshadowed frequently by the other half of the plot that is uninspired and has nothing new to say. So, where this could be pushing into new areas, it's just fumbling and disappointing me. By now, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are thinking, I bet Chuck's really in favor of the death penalty, but he doesn't want to be torn apart while he's ripping up this episode, so he's saying he's against it just so he has cover while he's mocking it. Well, no. I'm against the death penalty, reviewing an episode against the death penalty, and I'm just cringing. I feel about this the way that people who really love animals feel every time that they see an advertisement campaign by PETA. It's like, you're not helping. Iko pleads with Seven to stay and talk instead of going to Astrometric, so They discuss stars and constellations, and later she comes by with a pad showing information about the stars in the area, but it's just raw data. It's like someone who misses listening to singing being handed sheets of music. It's not helpful. But after asking about her Borg implants, he says that he deserves to die for all the harm that he has caused. But that's when the doctor calls Seven and Janeway in to explain what they have found. That Iko suffered from a brain condition that left the part of his brain that, well, would tell him not to be such an asshole. He would be prone towards psychotic, violent behavior his entire life with this congenital brain defect. But now if they have unintentionally repaired it, he realizes the consequences of his actions. He feels guilt and remorse. Let me reiterate, this is the part of the episode I like. I want to go off in this direction, explore a man coming to terms with the sudden realization that he has lived as a monster. If I seem antagonistic to the message, it's only because their ham fists are blocking the screen so I can't see the interesting parts of this. This guy that I didn't give a shit about before is evolving before me. I want to see more of that. He puts me in mind of the song Hurt. It was on Netflix Song Exploder a little over a year ago. You might have seen that. Try to kill it all away, but I remember everything. It's about the realization of our consequences. It's no coincidence that Johnny Cash sang that song near the end of his life that was failing from drug abuse, to look back and be faced with the reality of who we are. And I have to say personally, it is hands down my favorite song by 22.86 centimeter nails. So they make the argument to the warden that the situation needs to be re-examined, but naturally, he's disinclined to give the benefit of the doubt to a murderer who talked about paying the warden's family a visit. But they just want to know what the law says. Can he appeal based upon this new medical evidence? Well, the problem is that that's not what he wants. He wants to be punished for his crimes. But Seven notes that she too has performed heinous deeds while not under self-control. She got another chance. He deserves the same, even if the journey is going to be long and difficult. Always remember, the journey of 1,600 kilometers begins with a single step. But that's not what he wants. He gets sent back down to his cell where he gives his meal to the prisoner that previously he would always rob of his dinner. But it won't matter for much longer because the appeal has been rejected. It goes to the victim's family, who naturally are not interested in clemency for someone who murdered a man for being within strangling distance. Seven is outraged by this, and in private, she explains that she wants to atone for her crimes by helping him get the chance to atone for his. I mean, she doesn't come out and say that, but that's the gist of it. But that's not going to matter, because throughout this has been Neelix. He also tried to see if he could help that one prisoner that he'd been hanging out with, playing Scott, chatting about maybe seeing if Voyager can make restitution with the victim's family so that he could have his sentence set aside. That can happen in their justice system. You can buy your way out of it. That makes sense. I played Monopoly. I know how this works. Instead, the guy wants a letter sent to his brother. But what Neelix didn't realize was that this was actually part of a trick. It would be used to track it back to Voyager so a ship could come and attack them. And yeah, with power disruptions, all those force fields keeping the homicidal men with nothing to lose contained comes down. Nice one. You'd think they'd have enclosed the area that the cells are located in with a physical barrier to ensure that if they got out of their cells, they still couldn't escape this room. But no, this is Starfleet security we're talking about. Starfleet does not believe that 28.3 grams of prevention is worth 0.45 kilograms of cure. They manage to damage the attacking ship before it can beam away the convict and 4 of his friends. But they're still free and, oh yeah, armed with heavy rifles. They're working to blast their way into the shuttle bay in order to escape, but Tuvok and backup arrive, thwarting them for the moment, but not before they take the warden as hostage. Transporters are down, so there is no saving the warden right now, especially from the guy who claimed that he's innocent. And who knows, he may be, because as established, this guy's got nothing to lose. Iko steps in, though, saying that the warden shouldn't be killed by anyone except him after the way he's been treated. But the moment he gets the phaser, he hands it over to the warden to take the prisoners out, and he makes no attempt to resist. Well, this is enough to convince the warden that Iko really is a changed man, and persuades the family to at least give him a chance to speak in his own defense. Iko only wants them to know how much he wishes he could undo his crime, that he is prepared to die if that's what it takes to bring them peace, but that if he does live, he will never hurt anyone again and will try to be a better person. But alas, the family wants to have their 450 grams of flesh. Seven is busted up over this development, that she lives while someone who took only one life has died. But Janeway says that she's been punished enough being a drone for 20 years, not to mention all the spankings that Janeway gave her while wearing a sailor costume. I wish we could have better explored the potential. I can't help but remember how guilt in prison can affect a man from Deep Space Nine's Hard Time, which showed that even the best of us can sometimes be broken and become killers ourselves, even if you're a man as good as 1.6 kilometers O'Brien. Post-episode follow-up, stupid Neelix's moment is nearly getting them all killed. Again. Final score for Repentance is 5 out of 10. Either their death penalty episode was ruined by an interesting idea, or vice versa. It depends on how you want to look at it. I think that if Trek wants to do a message show, they should think about what they can do that other people aren't. And this was not it. I was also a bit aghast at what they did with that person who was feigning innocence. I mean, like I said, I'd like to see at least some acknowledgement of the other side of the argument, but I don't think the other side of the argument should really be, yeah, people who claim that we disproportionately execute minorities are wrong because they really are killers. I don't even know what to say to that other than this kind of commentary on racial justice really hasn't aged well, I don't think. So yeah, personally, they should have just minimized any of that death penalty stuff and focused instead upon what was the really interesting core of the episode. Ah, well.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
I'm afraid.